we're starting off with the classic trolley problem. So the basic description that's given here, for people that don't know, in this ethical dilemma, a runaway trolley is headed toward 5 people tied to a track, and you have the option to pull a lever to divert the trolley onto another track. But this would result in the death of 1 person. Should you actively intervene to save 5 lives at the cost of 1?
I think the way to solve this is you have to impose a certain philosophical system on it. And, a lot of reasons why, let's say, consequentialism, which would predict, let's say, that... What are the bad predictions it makes? Oh, like that you should push a person. Like in modifications of the trolley problem, it has some problematic conclusions. But the thing is, there is no system that will not make predictions that go against our intuition. And that said, intuitions differ between people. So in fact, even if you choose intuitionism or something like that, it will not have a way to please everyone's intuition. Okay.
Yeah, but just to clarify, intuitively, I think most people, it's been found that most people think that you should push the lever to save 4 people. There's a net saving of 4 people when you...
Yeah, but that's kind of the easy part. Right? That's like the easiest version of the trolley problem. And when it gets interesting is when you let's say there's the footbridge, and instead of pulling the lever, you have to push a large man on the tracks to make the same thing, right? Save 5 people. And now you're like, oh no, well, my fingers are touching that person, and that seems more problematic to me than simply pulling a metal lever, right? So what you have to realize about it is whatever the best solution to it is, it's gonna have haters, it's gonna have opposition. So what we're after is really how you can kind of better society, in my opinion. And I think I composed, so an interesting application of it, there's I think it's Stanford study or something like that. There's a website where you can go and make decisions for a self-driving car. I don't know if you've seen this.
No.
So the car, let's say, can swerve in one of 2 ways. And on one way, there's an old person, and then with a kid, and on the other there's two adults, right? And then you're like, okay, well, which one should the car swerve to?
I read your paper on that. You made me reread it before submitting it. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So yeah, I love that. I think I found pretty good solutions. So of course what you want is the best for society in that. So here's, how about, interesting future application of the trolley problem would be, okay, if we can accept self-driving cars, it's going to have to make decisions that won't please everyone, but they'll better society. So how about we redevelop that system, right? Where you could use it for self-driving cars. You could use it for trolley problem, right?
Okay.
So obviously the self-driving car is going to be the one doing everything. So you have to understand that the lever itself is the proxy for you pushing the large man off the bridge. So that's where you're gonna have to accept the responsibility of the self-driving car in any case. Like the fact that it's gonna be an algorithm in which the computer that dictates it, that you're sitting in that computer, right? So in driving that car or being driven by that car, you're gonna have to accept responsibility. So let's say it goes into an accident. You're going to have to, you might feel more disconnected than if you had driven into someone, right? But you're going to have to take on some responsibility because it's human to blame ourselves for it. And even though you could, a rational person could justify as, well, you weren't the one driving it, but yeah, you were kind of, you accepted that whatever consequence it was going to have on the world, you endorsed because you bought that car. So, but I know a lot of emotional people are going to be like, okay, no, my car killed a bunch of people.
Emotional people.
Yeah.
Yeah, but just a solution sort of that I read about to the trolley problem is like someone just wrote a paper and was like, okay, the people have been debating this for like decades. And the reason people have been debating for decades and haven't found a solution is because it's a non-problem. The trolley problem is like it's not a problem. When you pull the lever and you divert the cart from 5 people to 1 person, you're doing the wrong thing. Even if intuitively you feel like you're not and you're saving 4 people. And I tend to partially agree with that, because when you reduce, when you modify the trolley problem a bit and you go to footbridge where you have to push someone so that the person dies and, throws the train off the tracks, you're more involved in that action, but you're doing the same thing. What is the difference really between pulling a lever and pushing a person onto the bridge? Or let's say there's another modification that you could take, where let's invent a case where you have to shoot 1 person with a gun, right, to save 5 people. You wouldn't do that, because then you're killing that person, right? But it's the same thing. Like, what's the difference between pulling the trigger of a gun and pulling a lever? Arguably, there's no difference at all, because the effect of both of those actions are exactly the same. There's just a different level of detachment from it. And it's the same thing as you're saying with the cars. You're just more detached because, I just bought the car, the algorithm was approved by the government, so it's the government's fault, right? It's not your fault. And then the government's like, there's been research and the people that coded it assured us that it was fine, and it was tested and it was fine. And then the people that coded, they say but we got approved for it. It's not our fault. And you can infinitely just relay blame, but...
Yeah. But I thought you were going to take another direction that I would like more, and it would be that it's a non-problem because, in fact, if you have the best for humanity in mind, then what you're going to do all the time is sacrifice the 1 to save 5 people.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, technically you could say, okay, but it's wrong to kill someone, you could have that morally childish view, but no. What I mean is, I think it's a very hard to contest thing to have the best for humanity in mind. And when you take, just statistically, the probability of those 5 people accomplishing more for humanity than that 1 person, it's always favorable if it's 5 random people.
Well, I mean, for someone that hates on consequentialism quite often, that's surprising. There's other factors to consider. Sometimes consequentialism is just wrong.
Well, I think the consequentialism is perhaps the best thing for the trolley problems, because it's mathematical, and the trolley problem is mathematical in its nature. And also, the value that I'm plugging into the equation is not pleasure or anything basic like that. It's betterment of humanity. Again, you can contest what that means, but the problem with the trolley problem is that isn't there a thing where an evil person... Oh yeah. It's exactly the trolley problem if you really if you get down to it, right? An evil person has 5 people caged, and the cage is going towards the pool of lava or whatever, and he hands you a gun and he's like, okay, kill this innocent person, and those 3 people will escape. Well, if you assume that the evil killer is telling the truth, then you should kill that person, right?
Yeah, sure.
So
I mean, I think most people wouldn't, but yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They wouldn't have the guts, as you said. Just putting words into your mouth. But no, I think the interesting thing here is, okay, what is wrong? What is right? Is killing wrong? I haven't read any convincing argument that it is, right? But let's say, is hurting someone wrong? Let's say I'll give you that, right? Let's say you determine, okay, inflicting physical pain is wrong. Okay, but would you torture someone to get information that could potentially save an entire country? Would the government be morally permitted to torture someone if it could save an entire country for, I don't know, nuclear codes? It doesn't matter. And you would say intuitively, yeah, right? So it doesn't change the fact that you labeled hurting someone immoral. It would still be the moral thing to do to prevent harm. And I think that's a discussion we can have in another episode, because Socrates was of the opinion that you should never hurt others because it hurts your soul. And for me, I believe I disagree with that. I haven't thought about it enough, because if hurting others could prevent more harm in the world and you have the best for humanity in mind, it would almost be egotistical to not inflict that pain upon yourself. Right? You see? So it's just saying, okay, let's say killing is bad. Let's say I even give that to you. But could you do bad things if it was justified in certain situations? And in the killer lava cage thing, I'd say yeah. And I know most people wouldn't do it, but that's because they're not, perfect moral robots. It's because they're humans.
Okay, so I guess our solution to this, I would say that killing is bad. Whatever. That's my stance. But then I guess our response to the trolley problem would be that you have to go either one way or the other, right? My take would be that.
Well, that's a non-answer, no?
It sounds like a non-answer, and now that I've said it, it sounds like a non-answer. But what I mean is,
I think it means like, what's more important to you? And for me, the answer is clear: the best for humanity. And usually, that kind of gives you the mathematical advantage of being like, okay, would you kill 10 evil people to save one good person?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
Here's what I mean. What I mean is, you either have to, in all modifications of the trolley problem, do nothing because you think, taking action and killing someone is bad, or in all modifications of the trolley problem, commit. And like you're saying, just like if you're a surgeon and you have to save 5 people because one person needs a heart, the other person needs a lung, a liver, or whatever to live, and you have a person in front of you that's a compatible donor with all of them, you have to kill that person.
Didn't know more than 5 organs, said lung twice. But yeah,
there are 2 lungs.
I know, but you could have kind of used the variety.
Okay.
No, but good point. Good point. And that's a more extreme one. And then of course
But if you're going for your view, you have to commit to that and say that's the best for humanity, and you kill the person to give the organs.
I know, and I think in the killer example, it's even more linear. So my view kind of justifies it. But I think in the surgeon example, it's a little bit different, just because there's the right to live, and there's the thing where I understand how structurally it resembles the trolley problem, but I think.
What do you mean right to live?
No,
right to live is not a differentiating factor between, evil person and surgeon.
Right, I understand, but it's like, if the people, it just changes something in my mind. If the people are already in that cage or already tied up to the chair and in front of me while I have a gun, that kind of puts them on a different level for me to give me the right, because in that decision, it is really, there's really A or B in that situation. For the surgeon thing, I think the specific example you're referring to, usually there's like an unconscious person, so it is really like A or B. But I'm not saying, like, if 5 people are in need of organs, I wouldn't say it's justified to go on the street and kind of get a person and harvest the organs and save 5 people. That's what I don't think should be good.
Well, I think you have to restrict situations, like restrict the
thought experiment.
You restrict the thought experiment in both cases, because in the case of the evil wrongdoer, you can say, oh, but how do you know that if you kill the person, you can trust the other guy and he won't throw the people into the lava? You can sort of wiggle your way out of it, and I think you're wiggling your way out of the surgeon thing when in either case you have to restrict the situation to where you're forced into this choice.
Right, but okay, let's say there's like a coma patient, and it is really, like, let's say in the next hour you could open up the coma patient and you could save those 5 people with difficulty, but I would argue that you should do that. And again, the reason why we very strongly feel that shouldn't be the case is because we have such a, protective thing about life and this difference between life and death and
so
killing.
Weird, right?
It's not weird. I'm just saying it's something.
But I mean, I don't think you have to have the unconscious thing. You just have the person in front of you. Why is the unconscious thing?
Just because they're kind of laying there and they're an option. That's what I mean. You feel me? Like, it's just, how in the trolley problem the person is tied to the rails.
Yeah.
That to me is different than, okay, or some guy is just sitting at the end of a footbridge, right? It's not like, oh, I'm gonna like take a cake in my hand, lure a fat guy from the street, and then save those 5 people. It's A or B, you see?
Okay, well, why is that different? If the ultimate factor you should consider is the well-being of humanity, you should, you know, I consider killing to be evil, then that's one evil you're doing, which is arguably, well, in my mind, definitely worse than, luring the person with the cake. Why should you forego luring the person with the cake or, chasing down a compatible donor? Why?
That's a good point. I mean, but I think it's a leap from there are 2 tracks with people tied to them to I should go to the street and kill an innocent bystander to harvest their organs to save 5 people. It's just, there's kind of a disconnect there. And the unconscious thing, if you give me that's the example you want to use, yes, I'm, again, with difficulty, because it goes against my intuition, I would argue that you should, yeah. So again, what's more important to you, moral responsibility or betterment of humanity? And as for the self-driving thing, I can go quickly over it, right? Like, you remember it. Age doesn't matter because of 2 reasons. Albert Einstein from 60 to 80 will probably accomplish more than me from 0 to 100 years. So that's something. Then if you have a 34-year-old and a 35-year-old, you have to apply the age thing to justify your choice. And that becomes very different when you restrict it to that, right? As the ages approach, the age argument goes away. So essentially, if it's an old person, if it's not an old person, you should never be using age in the self-driving car decision making. After that, gender, obviously not. What else? What else is there? I guess
socioeconomic status.
Yeah, well, okay, that's, I mean, imagine even asking the question. That's ludicrous. I think after the kind of societal differences settle, which I don't think much should be considered, maybe ex-cons, there could be an argument made for that. But the main thing is here, you respect the law. So if someone is jaywalking and you could swerve into, let's say 5 people are jaywalking, and you could swerve into a person who's on the asphalt or sidewalk,
yeah.
Thank you, and 1 person, I think you should go through the 5 people jaywalking because legality should be kind of number 1. And if you program every car to be legal, then everyone will know that as long as you as a pedestrian respect the law, no trouble will arise. And I think that's a pretty good thing to have. So law, then I guess numbers, and also I think I had the thing where if you know you're only going to cause injuries, it could be 100 injuries, but it should never equal a human life.
Mm-hmm.
So I think an infinity of injuries is not worth a human life. So if you know you're going to injure 3 people, always do that instead of killing 1. Are there any other factors to consider?
Yeah, isn't there, diverting your path versus staying on what you're already doing?
Oh yeah, that's a big one. So if both things are legal and yeah. Always choose passivity if all other things are equal. So you can go left or right, and
you can go forward or swerve. No.
Okay, so let's say it's only a thing where you can go left or right, and on both things, on both paths, 2 people are jaywalking, right? So they're illegal in the same to the same extent. And in that case, if you were going to turn right, you turn right. I mean, I know it's not really passivity. I know it's more so, passivity is more so like if you were going to go forward, keep going forward. But, if all things are equal, you should choose not to swerve. As in the trolley problem, if one person is on one track and another person is on another track, if you're already going on one track, you shouldn't swerve tracks. That's it. And then the last thing is to calculate every life inside the car the same as lives outside the car. And the beauty with that is you're going to have the presupposition that whatever person is in the car is respecting the law. So after that, it only becomes a question of, number of human lives and whatnot. So if you have 3 passengers and you, of course, so 4 people in the car, and then there are 3 people in front of you, you're just going to keep going instead of like swerving into a pole and killing everyone in the car. So I think that's a pretty good system. That's kind of hard to counter argue. Move on to the next.
Yeah, sure.
Or unless you're unsatisfied.
No, just to conclude, I guess for this one we disagree. We just go to like opposite extremes. I would say that it's a non-problem in the sense that, you know, pulling a lever is the same thing as choking someone out.
And we agree on that.
Okay, sure, but
we just don't agree on the fact that that's a bad thing.
Yeah, right. But you should, you should like go all the way with what you think instead of like changing depending on what your intuition is telling you for each thing. You know, no matter how detached you are from the situation, whether you're pulling a lever or pulling a trigger.
Yeah, and the cool thing with that is that you can graduate. You can put it into
rank order.
Not really. You can just make it eventual, right? You can do press a button, pull a lever, then there's a rope attached with the large man. You can cut the rope, but you're not touching the guy, right? Then you can push the guy. Then you have a gun, right? And if your intuition changes through that, there's a problem because it's not your intuition you should be following, right? I think that's a pretty good conclusion.